Hello, and welcome to episode 75 of TBR, the To Be Read podcast, where we talk about the books we love and the topics that interest us. My name is Patrick Stemp, and as always, I have Jamie Maltman and Michael Ronn here with me. How are you guys doing?
Great, Patrick. How's it going this week?
Good. So tonight we are going to talk about tropes, and that's the title of the show, but I will also say that we may be talking about cliches, and we'll get to that in a little bit. We were going to maybe talk about the Goodreads Choice Awards, but at the end of the day we decided, meh. There's really not a lot to talk about there, mostly because we haven't read many of the books on the list. And so we're going to talk about tropes and cliches instead. So before we get into that, we will go over our reading for the week, and why don't we start with Jamie?
Sure. So I wasn't on last week, and I finished the one I talked about 2 weeks ago, which was the Haruki Murakami's pair of sort of debut novel and the follow-on novel, and really they're both novellas. I think combined it was like 200-something pages. So it was Wind and Pinball, or something in the Wind, but it said on the front Wind Pinball, and the second one was called Pinball 1973. So they're both about some 20-something or slightly older, I think in the second one, Japanese man in a small town in Japan, and just sort of the stuff happening to him. So it was more literary-ish style stuff, but definitely in Haruki Murakami's style of prose. So even from the very beginning, you can see distinctly that. And the second one does get a little bit into sort of magic realism, like he's so well known for. So that part of it I liked better. So I think I definitely, I overall enjoy his style, but I like when that kind of weird stuff's happening as well. So on the, just finishing off right from there, someone had lent me, actually one of my wife's cousins had lent me the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, which is possibly his best known book, and the one that he won lots of awards for. So I started reading that, and that's much more recent, like somewhere in the 2000s, I'm pretty sure. And I like it a lot better. So neat sort of bizarre stuff already happening fairly early on in the book, and yeah, strange phone calls and strange things happening with pets and weird places and whatever, typical sort of odd stuff happening. So I'm enjoying that, and it's a big one. It's not as massive as 1Q84, which I think is like 1,000 pages, but this one's like 600, so I'll be on it for a while.
Sorry, I was muted there. That's your
No
that's your week.
That is my week in reading. So.
Or 2 weeks. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, I've had a kind of a light week this week. I didn't really finish anything, but I've been reading a lot of books on video and audio production, and sorry in advance for the sound if you hear any crying babies in the background. I've got a new setup and still trying to figure this out, so fair warning. But I read, if you guys have heard of James Wedmore, he's got a YouTube channel, and I signed up for his mailing list, and he's got like a free ebook that you get, and it's massive. And it's the 48-Hour Film School book, and it basically teaches you how to shoot professional video with your iPhone, right? And with a very minimal economical setup. And really enjoyed that because I'm starting a YouTube channel here in the next couple weeks, so it's going to be fun. So that was pretty much my week, guys.
There's that baby. Okay, so let me see. I started off. I'm moving on with the Robot series by Isaac Asimov, and I'm going to show you the cover here for a sec because I'm going to mention it. But so this is the second book. Well, really, it's the third if you count I, Robot. But it's the second book in sort of the Elijah Bailey and R. Daniel Oliva sort of mystery series. And I'm rereading this after having not touched it in years. It's great. They're great mysteries in a science fiction setting. And the reason I wanted to show the cover was just, I was thinking, it's funny, I had these on my desk because I picked them up at the library, and one of the girls at work who reads a ton kind of walked by, and she's like, "Wow, those look terrible. Like, what is that?" And I was thinking, Asimov sells no matter what, but the publisher, they probably don't need the money, but they could really do with an update on the art on these covers. Because the first thing people, think when they see this is like, God, that looks like it was written in the 50s. And it was, but that doesn't mean it's not an amazing read. So they, if you look at the covers that are sort of expected today and the things people are doing with it. I'd really like to see some of these old books updated to look a little bit newer. And the next book I started reading is, I'll just show you since I got it here, David Wong's Futuristic Violence and Fancy Suits. So David Wong is the author of John Dies at the End, and this book is full of spiders. Seriously, dude, don't touch it. So you've probably heard of at least John Dies at the End. That's a book that was huge, I'm going to say 6 or 7 years ago by now. And it's that's a pseudonym. The author's, the real guy's name is Jason Pargin. He's the executive editor at Cracked, the website, cracked.com. And I don't know why he isn't. He says it takes him about 2 years to write a book, which I don't get, because Cracked is pretty much just clickbait and, you know, top 5, top 7, top 10 lists these days. So I'm sure they've got a staff of writers overseas cranking that crap out. But if you've read John Dies at the End, and this book is full of spiders, I have not too far into this one yet, but it's got the same. He's hilarious, and those first 2 books actually were quite dark as well, sort of end of the world apocalypse type stuff. And so I'll report more on this one when I finish reading it. And then, so up next on my TBR list, I was going to show this because it came in the mail today, and it's a brick. This is the 3rd compendium in the Walking Dead series.
Nice.
So I'm going to start reading that. I think I'm probably going to put this on the shelf until the current, the first half of season 6 of The Walking Dead, which is on right now. Sort of, they go on their typical like 4-month Christmas break at the end of November. So that's a perfect time to pick that up and get ahead of the show before it comes back in like February, I think. And then finally, I'm going to have to be reading this, which you guys probably won't be too excited about, but this is the Vault Dwellers Survival Guide for Fallout 4, which just came out today, which was a birthday present from back in September. So I've been waiting like 2 months to get my hands on this game, and I'm going to start playing it as soon as we get off the air here. So let's wrap this up. So
show night.
Yeah. So that's my reading for the week and upcoming in the next month. So let's move on and talk about tropes and or cliches I mentioned, because I was looking. I'm sure if anybody did any research on this stuff at all, I guarantee we were probably all on the exact same website, and that would be tvtropes.org, which is the starting place for. That's an amazing website. That is a place that you can get lost in for just hours and hours and hours. It's a rat's nest of links to, this trope leads to that trope. And on their main page, I just was going to read the little sort of blurb they have. They say that tropes are devices and conventions that a writer can reasonably rely on as being present in the audience members' minds and expectations. So that's a good thing. On the whole, tropes are not cliches. The word cliched means stereotyped and trite. In other words, dull and uninteresting. So, when thinking of some of the, in quotes, tropes that I was looking at, I was like, oh, I wonder if those are cliches or really tropes. And I think it's an easy mistake to make, or a tough distinction to make. I was thinking of that irony versus just having a bad day, and that song by Alanis Morissette that everyone, So I think with irony or bad luck or just having a bad day, we might make the same mistake with tropes or cliches. So you can call us out in the comments if we make a mistake. But so I have one to lead off.
Yeah, go for it.
And this is one that came to mind because I saw it on a recent, and we'll probably touch on TV and movies and stuff like that too, because more people have seen them than have necessarily read the same books. But in last week's episode of The Blacklist, there was a scene, and I'm trying to remember which other ones I've seen recently where they did this, but this is where a character, it's kind of the opposite of a villain monologuing his evil plan. This is one of the heroes stating exactly what he's going to do to get out of a situation, and then doing exactly that thing, and it turns out exactly how he said it would. So he's surrounded by 4 or 5 bad guys, and he says, well, I'm going to take that guy's knife, and then I'm going to use it to kill that guy, and then I'm going to take his gun, and that guy who's standing beside you is going to use his gun, but he'll probably just shoot somebody else by accident, and then I win, kind of thing. And then he proceeds to do exactly, move by move, exactly what he just said he was going to do, and they just let it happen. And I know I've seen it 3 or 4 times in different shows. Like, it seems to be becoming kind of a thing now. Like, people think it's cool for the hero to announce his intentions and then get away with it. So that was my first one. I don't have a name for that, but
Called shot.
is that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's kind of what it is, right?
Calling the shots. Yeah.
Like the called shot, the Babe Ruth called shot, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I bet you if it's on TV Tropes, I bet you I wouldn't have thought of that, but I bet you that's if it's on there, we should look that one up.
Yeah, that's one thing about the TV Trope site that I noticed when I was going through it, is that they have the weirdest names for the tropes. Like, I can never put 2 and 2 together when I read it. Like the washing machine. What the hell is the washing machine? That's weird stuff like that. But I have one.
But
Yeah,
well, do you
I
know?
just
Well,
made that up.
you have to answer that. Oh, you just made it up. I was going to say you can't say
No,
that.
I just made that up. Yeah, I was going to leave you guys in suspense.
I'm gonna have to look that one up and see if it exists. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had one. It was called the Mind Probe, and I'll just read it off of the site here. One of the characters is captured and restrained if they have the information that the big bad or the villain wants, or if the captors are feeling just a little bit sadistic, the bad guys will break out the Mind Probe. And the device uses a lot of fancy lights and electronic effects and frightening hallucinations for the hero or both, and it makes the hero suffer and either give up the information that the bad guy wants or make the hero kind of delve deep into themselves. And pretty common.
I think we see that probably more with drugs than
Yeah.
these days. Like, they'll use that in the show, like Person of Interest and stuff like that. Truth serums and
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Harry Potter, the Veridiserum. That was the first thing that kind of comes to mind there. And then there's a scene in The Beam, right around the middle of season 1, where a couple of the characters are kind of trapped, and they break out this device that kind of breaks in or hacks into their minds. So that's a pretty common one that I've seen quite a bit.
I finally got around to finishing Shield last season's Shield, and compliance will be rewarded. It's like this whole season 2 thing there. In that vein, so.
Agents of Shield.
Yeah, Agents of Shield.
Talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't watch that one.
No, had a fun second season, but anyway.
Sorry, another one I had, and you see this in mysteries all the time. And I may have mentioned this one before. I can't remember in previous conversations, but and again, I don't know what you would call it, but where the hero solves the crime due to an offhand comment that another character makes. Castle is absolutely terrible for this, where you're 3/4 of the way through the show or the book or whatever, and they've got all the clues, but they just can't seem to make everything connect, and then another character in the show will say something completely random, like, what'd you have for dinner last night? Oh, I had a cheeseburger, and the word cheeseburger just makes Castle go, I know who committed the murder, and they run off and solve the crime. And I obviously, because it usually involves solving a mystery, that's thrillers and mysteries and crime novels and stuff like that. But Castle's terrible for that. I was one of the reasons, one of a few reasons that I stopped watching it. And Brooklyn Nine-Nine does it sometimes. That's another, it's a cop show, but I can live with it there because that's a comedy, and solving the crime isn't what the show is about. It's kind of secondary, so they can kind of get away with it there, and still have a good show. So that's another one of mine.
Cool. Did you have one, Jamie?
It's funny. I was trying to look up sort of some of the fantasy trope stuff, but then it's so when you go through some sites for that sort of thing, it's such basic stuff that it almost seems lame to even talk about it. Like their list of fantasy tropes would be like a dark lord,
Mm.
or magic, or races like elves and dwarves. Like it's which I guess, it is really, they are that kind of trope thing where, it is, can be an expected thing and is acceptable within it, but it just seems
Well, that's where
right.
I think there's I guess you could almost would have to chart it or something. Like there's sort of a path between like a trope, which I almost think is like we've read about, tentpole moments is what some people might call it, or in the story grid, Sean Coyne calls them like, just genre conventions. Like if you're writing a mystery, you need, or a crime, you need a dead body. You need a false lead. So there's these expectations of the genre, and where's the line between something that's a trope, an expectation, something that you can play on, and then hopefully subvert and make better than what was expected or surprise the reader, and then you get into cliche, right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, naturally, a cliche is a trope that's overused. So, like the chosen one, like you were talking about fantasy idioms or fantasy tropes, Jamie. Idioms, I don't know where I pulled that out of the air, but tropes. Like that is a common fantasy trope, right? And it's been beaten to death. And so I think, but the interesting thing about cliches is they kind of fall in and out of favor, right? So like everyone today is kind of tired of these chosen one stories, and they're still popular, but they're not as hot. But 50 years from now, they could come right back, right? It just kind of depends. It's all cyclical.
And you could use, a great author could use those, or does use, or will use those tropes and conventions, or even cliches, to sort of lull the reader into a false sense of security, and then just flip it around at the last minute and take it somewhere completely different. Which, so none of these are necessarily bad if you use them the right way, right? Even cliche.
Exactly.
But
Yeah, I had
but it's really tough.
Yeah, I mean, any trope in the wrong hands can be a bad thing, right? But I mean, you take one author that uses a trope and it could suck, right? But you take another author that can subvert it, or just has a better writing style or a better story, and it totally works, right? I mean, how many times have we read a book where, okay, this is, guy meets girl for the 50,000th time, right? But I like this story because I think it's kind of that's why people like
Mhm.
romance.
They know what to expect. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think, what I mentioned, Brooklyn Nine-Nine being able to get away with it because it's a comedy. I think that kind of the entire sort of comedy genre can really get away with that stuff. In fact, if you look at a movie like Spaceballs, it's nothing but cliches and tropes, and or say Zombieland. Um,
Or Scream.
yeah, where they kind of rely on that stuff, right? But even there, by the time you get to Scream 5, I imagine that even the cliches are getting pretty darn cliche, and it's just, um, so it can be smart and funny to start, but you still have to kind of manage, not overdo it, I guess.
Yeah, well, it just
There
goes
still has
back
to
to in
be
the
there
wrong
still has to be some
hands.
substance to it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I had
all
another one.
the all the movies by yeah sorry all the
No,
movies that Simon Pegg and Nick Frost do. I mean, they rely on that stuff too, right? The Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead, Paul, um, at World's End. they they're all, I mean, that's what they do too, right? They're pulling from tropes and cliches and tentpole moments that we expect. And they've actually got a new one, or Simon Pegg has a new one coming out, which I kind of wonder if it's like the fourth or fifth in that sort of series that they're doing. This one's going to be a romantic comedy, so they're going to pull the rug out from under the rom com, and it looks like it will be good.
that sounds awesome. Yeah, I have another one that I had written down. Escaped from the lab, and that's a character who has escaped from a laboratory that ends up being an important part of their backstory. He or
Mm.
she might have been conceived there, been raised there, or spent a significant part of their life there. They might have even served in the lab as an interesting specimen, an object of study, subject of experimentation, or the ultimate goal of the lab.
Are we seeing that a lot now? Because although I don't watch these shows, just you saying that made me think of Orphan Black.
Yeah.
And what's the new one that's out where the girl's covered in tattoos?
Yeah. I can't think of the name of that, but I see that advertised all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what
So
you're talking about.
something there. They have no memory. She's clearly come from some, maybe not a lab, but some sort of facility that did this to her, and
And now there's hell to pay.
yeah. So
Well,
there's
like John Doe was like that too, right? That show a few years ago. It's funny you just saying that. I thought of Rocket Raccoon from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Is that, and the
what
way they
about
did the Ninja Turtles
Every
back
superhero in the world, right?
what about Chuck? Again, that's a show I haven't watched, but I know just enough about it to wonder if Chuck was a show like that. So I know he had some memories or information implanted into his skull, and they spend the show trying to keep him safe so that other people can't get to it or something like that. So where'd Michael go? Go ahead, Jamie.
No, I was gonna say I had a sort of neat one that um, the tropes of the Chinese like kung fu, like what they call the wuxia type movies, which was they've done tons of them with like the wire fu, the people flying around doing all the stuff. It's really ingrained into like Hong Kong culture and the movies there. But then when they brought that over and made Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, people hear like, wow, either wow, this is this totally new, different thing that's amazing and cool and different, or some people went, I don't get this. This is so weird and like. But it was neat seeing something that was tropish to the point of cliche in some parts of it in Asia come here and be something different. And they played with that and was well acclaimed, right?
And that made me think, when you were talking about that, made me think of kind of Kill Bill, and that leads me to like Quentin Tarantino. I guess you'd have to say is sort of a master of the trope,
Yeah, he is.
and subverting the cliche. Just when you think something's going to happen in one of his movies, he does something like legitimately surprising and pretty awesome. The Hateful Eight, the movie that he has coming out soon, like the trailer doesn't really kind of strike me very much, but I'll definitely probably want to check that movie out. And it's got the same guy that he's been using in the last few movies from Inglourious Bastards and Django Unchained. I can never remember the actor's name. He won the Oscar, I think, for Inglourious Bastards.
Christoph Waltz.
Yeah, he's amazing, and he's in this one.
Yeah, I love Christoph Waltz. He's hilarious.
Yeah, so yeah, Quentin Tarantino, sorry, is definitely someone who makes a living off of tropes and subverting expectations.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And walking that really fine line with cliche. He's probably, I can't think of anyone better, actually.
Yeah, he's definitely he's one that's interesting because he's kind of made his career lately of subverting the cliches. I think in the beginning of his career, like not Goodfellas, Reservoir Dogs, and Pulp Fiction, he kind of invented those tropes, right? Like all the camera techniques and the dialogue that he was using. Like, yeah, Pulp Fiction, it was based on pulp novels and pulp films, but I think like a lot of films it came after that tried to copy what he was doing, and so I think now he's kind of like done a 180 and where he's taking a lot of tropes and subverting them. But I think early Tarantino was a trendsetter.
Yeah, I can't think of any reason to argue with you on that.
That's the truism of the show. The truest statement of the show this week.
Let's see. Jamie, have any other tropes come to mind? I'm trying to.
It's funny. I was actually just looking into some fantasy cliche ones, and I was reading a part of a list, and I'm like, man, like there's a couple of books. It's like check. It's like 5, 6 of those in a row, and it just makes you shake your head a little bit.
The one that there's, and again, I don't know that this would be I think it's probably more a trope than a cliche, but it's definitely something that makes me angry, especially on TV shows. And it's that moment where a character is like, I have to tell you right now the most important thing that you'll ever hear in your life, and then something happens to stop those two characters. But or I have really important information for you, but you're not ready to hear it. I'll tell you later. I despise that kind of withholding. Especially when they're, it's not as bad when they let you know what is going on, because then maybe you understand why they're withholding the information. But when they withhold it and don't tell you why, or they just kind of, a car comes crashing through the window and they have to deal with that, and it's 3 more episodes or 18 chapters before you get to the information that is supposedly so important, that stuff just kind of annoys me. If you're
Now,
not,
does it annoy you because it works, or does it annoy you because it's just annoying?
it annoys me because it seems cheap.
Too
Like,
obvious.
if you're not ready for character A to have that information, don't bring it up. Right? Like,
Yeah.
don't. It seems like a cheap way to add tension. So that leads me to another one, I guess, that bothers me as a way to add tension to a story that really isn't there. And I love Robert J. Sawyer, but he tends to do this a lot, or he used to, and that is where his main character will have cancer, or something is going on in the character's body that forces them to deal with the events in the story at a faster pace. Whereas if it wasn't for this disease, they could take all the time they wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like kind of a fake way to add tension to a story that otherwise, I think there's probably a better way to do that.
Yeah, and there's the flip side of that too, where the one that just irks me to no end, and you don't see as many books on this anymore, but where the characters go on a road trip, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they liberate the road trip liberates them, or they have this eye-opening, mind-expanding experience.
Life-changing.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
Is that
And they come
is that
home.
a trope though, or is that a genre?
I don't know. It's like a mixture of both. I mean, it was a couple
I,
of years ago. A couple of years ago, where we just saw tons of those.
what's
Like
what's the one where they're in the yellow bus?
Little Miss
Yeah,
Sunshine.
yeah.
Yeah, and then Eat, Pray, Love is another one. It's
But the
kind of
road
like
trip, the road trip thing, movie, or I think that's more of a genre than a trope. But the
yeah,
things that happen on that road trip,
right.
one of my favorite road trip movies has got to be Due Date
Okay, I
with
haven't seen that one.
it's with Zach Galifianakis, if I'm pronouncing that right, and Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. is just so funny in that movie. He's such a jackass, and just it's great. But that's a road trip movie that with some heart and some chuckles. It's awesome.
Yeah, my favorite is Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle.
Mm-hmm.
I love that movie. It's so stupid, but it's hilarious. But yeah, I like the road trip. So yeah, I guess that's a good point. It is kind of a little bit of a genre, but it's also a cliche, and in the wrong hands, it's kind of it's a trope, but in the wrong hands, it would be a cliche.
There and
And you
back
could
again.
take
I was just saying, road trip. There and back again, a Hobbit's holiday.
That's the ultimate road
that's
trip.
a long ass road trip.
No, that was the Hobbit. That's not that long.
That's not a road trip. That's a voyage, man.
I only think of like in Clerks 2, where the one guy who's complaining about Lord of the Rings is like, even the damn trees in those books just walk everywhere.
Well, that's a great series of movies right there, Clerks. I haven't seen those movies in years.
I heard he's doing a new one. I don't know. I
Clerks
don't know.
3, really?
No, not. What is he doing? I don't know if it's within the Clerks world, but I did hear that he's doing something in
Nice.
his sort of universe.
Like the Jay and Silent Bob sort of.
Maybe, yeah, maybe, or Mallrats. Who knows? Well,
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had another one on my list, and that's the accidental hero.
Okay.
Right. So it's the guy that is about to do something, maybe end his life, or I don't know, jump off a cliff or something, and then all of a sudden something miraculous happens, and he's an instant hero. Right. It's kind of like the every man becomes a hero. I mean, you see that a lot in TV shows.
Yeah, I suppose. I'm trying to think of an example. I don't know if you have any, but
Like
the
the
only.
great American hero, right? He's kind
Yeah,
of
I
like
was going to say the only example I could think of is every single superhero TV show that's on right now.
yeah, Spider-Man,
Right?
Batman. Well, ex-Batman's not an accidental hero, but yeah, I mean, pretty popular.
Yeah, other than a hero like Superman, who was kind of born with his abilities. Yeah, all those comic book heroes kind of, accidentally fell into a vat of goo or whatever.
Or accidentally get exposed to radiation,
Mm-hmm.
gamma radiation or something. Yeah, that's one that I had on my list.
Okay.
What about you guys? What else you got?
I'm out on my list.
All right, I think I'm out too. Just rolling the dice on trope.com. If I can come up with anything else, but I think.
Oh, do they have an like a thing that where you can do that? Just pull
Yeah,
up.
you can just it's got on the top. You just click it and you
I
get a
got some
random trope.
weird stuff when I tried doing that.
Yeah, like I said, these names just don't make any sense.
That website I think is fantastic for anyone who's sort of looking for an idea of something to write about. Is just go on there, pick 3 random tropes, and subvert them and turn it into a story.
Yeah.
Just as a starting point for someone who's blocked or needs a quick idea.
See, I'm the opposite. When I was writing Android Paradox, I was on this site, and it depressed the hell out of me because it's like everything I came up with was a cliche.
Everything is
So I guess in some way, like, it helped me write a better story, but on the other hand, you can definitely go too far. Like, I wouldn't rely on this entirely because I don't know. I'm one of those people where I like to come up with a story and then, oh, what are the stories out there like that?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a good site. It's awesome.
Yeah, because just because you're using something, that's on their site doesn't mean it's bad. Again, there's a difference between a convention and expectation, because that I think you do want to know. If you're going to dive in and write a romance, you need to know what's expected, so that so you can understand. Like you can't break the rules until you understand them, right?
Right. It's like the truth hurts. It's like the idea you came up with wasn't that original, so you have to figure out ways to tweak it a little bit so that it's fresh.
Yep, for sure. So have we exhausted our list for this week?
Yeah, I'm out, guys.
Okay.
good.
Jamie?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. It was a good talk. So we will wrap things up here, and next week we have Chris Porteau joining us, and he is another one of the Tales of the Apocalypse authors. He wrote the story Unconditional, which I read, and we will talk about some more next week. And so we will talk to you then. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, guys.